She called me at 11:14 on a Tuesday morning. I remember the time because I had just set my coffee down and was about to walk into a site meeting. 31 years in civil engineering, and I still showed up early to every meeting. That was the kind of man I was. I didn't recognize the number at first. It was her cell, the new one she'd gotten the previous spring, and I almost let it go to voicemail. I'm glad I didn't. Not because the call was good news. It wasn't. But because what happened in the next 4 seconds changed the course of everything, and I needed to hear her say it herself. "I need you to go home," she said. "No hello. No how are you. Pack what you need for a few weeks. I'll explain later." I stood there in the gravel parking lot of a drainage project outside Barrie, Ontario, and I asked her to repeat herself. She did. Same words. Same flat tone. "What happened?" I asked. "Nothing happened. I just need space to think. We'll talk." We'd been married for 28 years. Her name was my emergency contact at the hospital. I had shoveled her mother's driveway every winter for a decade, and she was asking me to pack a bag and leave our home in Oakville like I was a house guest who'd overstayed. I drove home. I didn't call her back. I didn't have the words yet. Our house on Morrison Crescent was quiet when I got there. Mid-morning quiet, the kind that only happens when both people are usually at work. I walked through the front hall and noticed her shoes were already lined up too neatly by the door. She'd been home recently enough to tidy. I made myself another coffee and sat at the kitchen table for about 20 minutes, just looking at the backyard. The cedar deck I'd built myself the summer our youngest left for university. The garden bed my wife had started and then abandoned 2 years in, and I'd kept going because the neighbors liked it. The fire pit we'd used exactly 3 times. I packed a bag, 2 weeks of clothes, my blood pressure medication, my laptop, the folder of documents I kept in the filing cabinet, tax returns, insurance, the copy of our mortgage renewal. Habit or instinct. I'm not sure which. I drove to my brother's place in Hamilton. He asked me what was going on, and I told him I didn't know yet. He made us sandwiches and put a hockey game on and didn't push it. That's the thing about a good brother. He knows when to let silence do the work. 3 days passed before my wife called again. She didn't come to me in person. She called. I thought about that later. How she chose a phone call for something like this. What it said about where we already were. "My aunt passed away," she said. "Her mother's sister, out in Victoria. They hadn't been close, not for years. A difficult woman, apparently. I had met her twice at family gatherings, and both times she'd barely spoken to me. I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it even then. "She left me everything," my wife said. "The house in Oak Bay, the investment portfolio. There's a lawyer in Victoria handling the estate. It's significant, apparently." I didn't say anything. "I need you to understand," she continued, "that this changes things for me. For what I want. I've been unhappy for a long time, and I think you know that." I did know it. I'd known it the way you know weather is coming. You can feel it in the joints, but you keep hoping you're wrong. "I want to sell the Oakville house," she said. "My name is on the title too. I want to split it fairly and move forward separately." There it was. "Are you asking for a divorce?" I asked. "I'm saying I want a new life," she said. "And I think, if you're honest with yourself, you do too." I didn't answer that. I told her I'd need to speak with a lawyer. She said that was fine. She sounded relieved. That was the part I kept coming back to in the weeks that followed. How relieved she sounded. My brother's wife gave me the name of a family lawyer in Burlington. A woman named, I'll just say she came highly recommended. No nonsense. Efficient. The kind of person who made you feel like the situation was already being managed before you finished explaining it. She asked me to bring everything, so I brought the folder. The first thing she told me was this: in Ontario, matrimonial property law is not about whose name inherited what. An inheritance, received after the marriage began, is generally not subject to equalization, unless it gets mixed into shared property or used for shared benefit. My wife's windfall from her aunt was hers. I had no claim to it, and I wasn't looking for one. But the matrimonial home, our home on Morrison Crescent, that was a different matter entirely. Both names on the title, both names on the marriage. The equalization process would apply to the net value of that property. Has she asked you to sign anything yet? My lawyer asked. Not yet, I said. Good. Don't sign anything without bringing it to me first. 2 weeks later, my wife's lawyer sent over a proposed separation agreement. I read it at my brother's kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon. I'm not a lawyer, but I've read enough contracts in my career to know when something is written to benefit one party more than the other. The proposed division of the Oakville house gave her 60%. The rationale, as far as I could parse it, was that she would be foregoing any claim on my pension, a federal government pension I'd contributed to for over 3 decades. My lawyer looked at it and said 3 words. This isn't fair. She walked me through the actual numbers. My pension, valued properly, was significant, but the proposed trade-off undervalued it by a substantial margin. The house, at current Oakville market value, had appreciated to just over $1.4 million. 60% of that equity minus the pension offset they were proposing left me with roughly $180,000 after 28 years of joint mortgage payments, joint expenses, and a shared life. She has a new lawyer, my lawyer told me. Probably hired right after she got the estate news. They're counting on you not knowing what your pension is actually worth. I wasn't angry. I want to be clear about that. I was something quieter than anger. I was resolved. I sent a counteroffer through my lawyer, equal split on the matrimonial home, proper actuarial valuation of the pension. No shortcuts. My wife called me herself 2 days later, not through her lawyer. That was the first time since the beginning that I felt like I was talking to the woman I had married. You're making this harder than it needs to be, she said. I'm making it accurate, I said. Silence on the line. I thought you just want it over, she said. I do want it over, I said. I want it over fairly. She said she needed to think. I said, take your time. I meant it. I had already adjusted to the pace of this. I was sleeping better than I had in years, actually. My brother's guest room had blackout curtains and no noise after 9 o'clock. I started walking in the mornings along the waterfront trail in Hamilton. An hour, sometimes more, just me and the lake and whatever was left to think through. The estate settlement came through in late October. Her aunt's Oak Bay property alone, I later learned through the legal disclosures, was assessed at just under $2.1 million. The investment portfolio added another $800,000 or so. My wife had gone from our comfortable but not extravagant life in Oakville to being, effectively, a millionaire overnight. I wasn't bitter about that. People don't choose their inheritances, but I noticed something shift in how she communicated once the money was confirmed. The tone in her lawyer's letters became more clipped, more transactional, as though the wealth had made the marriage feel smaller in retrospect and she was in a hurry to close the file. I didn't hurry. December came. My brother suggested I look for a rental while things were sorted out. I found a 1-bedroom apartment in a quiet building in Dundas, a small town just west of Hamilton, older streets, good light in the afternoons. I signed a 6-month lease. I bought a second-hand armchair and set it by the window and started reading again for the first time in years. Alistair MacLeod, Alice Munro. The kinds of books I'd meant to read when the kids were small and never got around to. The separation agreement negotiations continued into the new year. Her lawyer kept trying to reintroduce the pension trade-off in different configurations. My lawyer kept returning us to the math. It became almost rhythmic after a while. Offer, response, counter, hold. In February, something shifted. My wife called again. Not her lawyer. Her. Can we meet? She asked. Just us. Coffee. We met at a Tim Hortons off Dundas Street, neutral ground, halfway between where each of us was living. She looked well. Different. Somehow. Lighter in a way that was hard to articulate. She'd cut her hair. We sat across from each other with our coffees and didn't say anything for a moment. I've been thinking, she said, about what you said. about being accurate. And I think I was angry, she said, and I wanted it to be fast because fast felt cleaner. But I wasn't being accurate. About a lot of things. I nodded. I wasn't going to fill the silence for her. The house should be equal, she said. 50-50. And the pension valuation. Your lawyer's number was the right number. I asked someone else to look at it and they agreed. I asked her why she'd had it looked at again. She was quiet for a moment. Because I'm going to have to live with myself after this, she said. And I think I lost sight of that for a while. We didn't reconcile. I want to be straightforward about that. The marriage was done. I think it had been done for longer than either of us had admitted, and the inheritance had simply given her the means to say so. But sitting across from her in that coffee shop in February, something else ended too. The version of this where I became the man who got left behind and stayed that way. The final agreement was signed in April. Equal division of the matrimonial home. Proper pension valuation. Clean, mutual, done. The Oakville house sold quickly. 2 weeks on the market. A young family from Mississauga who made an offer the same weekend as the open house. The equity split down the middle left me with enough to think clearly about what came next. I didn't rush. I took the summer. I kept the apartment in Dundas. I drove up to Manitoulin Island with my brother in July, the way we used to do when we were young, before careers and mortgages and all the things that crowd a life. We fished for 2 days and caught almost nothing, and it didn't matter at all. In August, I got a call from my wife's cousin, someone I'd always liked, a straightforward person. She wanted me to know, she said, that my wife had purchased a condo in Victoria near her aunt's old property. She was settling into life out there, starting over on the island. Are you okay? Her cousin asked me. Yes, I said, and I meant it. I've been asked since then by my brother, by old colleagues, by my own kids, when they finally stopped being protective enough to ask directly what the hardest part was. It wasn't the leaving. It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the quiet of the apartment in those first weeks, which I expected to be brutal and turned out to be something closer to neutral, then gradually something closer to relief. The hardest part was the phone call in the parking lot outside Barrie. Not because of what she said, but because of what I felt when she said it. Nothing. I had expected devastation. I had prepared myself, unconsciously, for some version of grief, the loud, immediate kind. What I got instead was stillness, like a lake just after the wind stops. And I stood there in that gravel lot and realized the stillness wasn't shock, it was recognition. We had arrived here slowly, over years, both of us, and neither of us had said so out loud. The inheritance didn't change us, it just removed the last reason we had to keep not saying it. I'm 63 now. I rent a house in Dundas. Proper house, not the apartment anymore, with a small yard I don't do much with. I walk the waterfront trail most mornings. I'm back to consulting part-time, enough to stay useful, not enough to lose the quiet again. My kids visit on long weekends and we cook and argue about hockey and nobody talks about the divorce unless they want to, which is fine. I am not the man who got left behind. I want to be clear about that. I am the man who packed a bag, got an accurate number, signed a fair agreement, and drove up to Manitoulin Island in July with his brother to catch nothing and feel fine about it. That's the whole story. There's no villain in it, not really. Just two people who ran out of reasons, and one of them found out sooner than the other, and the money just made the timing obvious. The line went quiet after she called that Tuesday morning. I let it stay quiet. I picked up my coffee, walked into my site meeting, and did my job. Some things you grieve loudly. Some things you grieve like a long exhale. This was the second kind. I thought a lot about that gravel parking lot outside Barrie, the way the wind came off the fields, the way I stood there holding a phone that had just gone quiet and felt nothing. Not the nothing of a man who doesn't care. The nothing of a man who already knew. That's the part I couldn't have explained to anyone at the time. People expect a crisis to arrive loud. They expect you to fall apart in some visible way, to say something, to need something. What I've learned, and it took most of my 60s to learn it, is that the quietest moments are often the most honest ones. The storm had been building for years. The inheritance just opened the door. I don't hold anything against my wife. I mean that plainly, not as a performance of magnanimity. She made a choice that the money made possible, and in making it, she was more honest than either of us had been in a long time. There's a certain integrity in that, even when it hurts. And it did hurt, not in the parking lot, but later, alone in my brother's guest room, listening to Hamilton go quiet outside the window. Grief arrived on its own schedule. It always does. What I'm grateful for, and I use that word carefully, is that I didn't panic. I packed the folder. I found a good lawyer. I read the agreement on a Sunday afternoon and trusted what I understood to be true, that fair is a specific number, not a feeling, and that I was entitled to accuracy. Not revenge. Not more than my share. Just the accurate number. I think that's what my brother's way of sitting with me those first evenings taught me without either of us saying it. He made sandwiches. He put the game on. He didn't tell me what to feel or how fast to move. And in that steadiness, I found my own. The people who hold still around you when everything is moving. Those are the people worth keeping. If I had let fear or resentment drive those months, I would have signed the first agreement and walked away short. Or I would have fought badly out of pride and lost something harder to recover than money. Instead, I stayed in my own lane. I did the work. I got the right number. And then I went fishing on Manitoulin Island with my brother and caught nothing and felt genuinely fine. There's a cause and effect to how a life turns out that has nothing to do with luck. It has to do with whether you know what you're worth, not in a boastful sense, but in a factual one. Whether you have the honesty to look at a hard situation clearly, without softening it and without catastrophizing it. Whether you have the steadiness to keep moving through something difficult without letting the difficulty define you. Those three things, the honesty to see clearly, the knowledge to act rightly, and the steadiness to keep going. I didn't always have them in equal measure, but I had enough. Enough to walk out of that Tim Hortons in February knowing that whatever came next, I had handled myself in a way I could live with. That's the only ending worth having.